webinar today. My name is Amy Biedenhardt. I work with the Academy and will be your host for today's session. Before I hand it over to Jonathan Valdez, who's one of our key volunteer leaders with the NOMIN group, he'll be your moderator today. I do want to go through just a few quick housekeeping things, and then we will kick off the program. A reminder to keep down on background noise. If you can keep your microphone muted throughout the presentation, that will help us be able to hear our speakers today. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, we do have some time set aside for a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So feel free to use the chat box that's in your WebEx window, and you can send your questions to me, and we'll keep track of those to go through at the end of the session. Following the webinar today, you will receive a follow-up email from me, and it will have a link to the recording of this session, a copy of the presentation slides, as well as your CEU certificate. So if you're looking to take any notes, keep in mind you will get a copy of the presentation and the recording. So keep your eye out for that. If you are a NOMIN member, the webinar will be posted on the NOMIN website. So if you're not a member, we encourage you to join our community so that you can access that and keep the conversation going. We do have a discussion board out on the NOMIN website as well as our social media. So we encourage you to keep the conversation going there. Otherwise, if you're having any technical issues, I'll be accessible through the chat box within your WebEx window, so you can contact me there. With that, Jonathan, I'm going to hand it over to you so that you can further kick off the session and take it from here.
Hello, everyone, for joining us. I'm Jonathan Valdez. I'm the online developer, aka person in charge of doing the webinars. So I hope I find everyone well. Our presentation today is going to be diverse and successful pathways to your career and leadership with the NOMIN member internship group. Below our webinar in the corner, you can find NOMIN's Twitter, my Twitter, Neva, Milton, and Marty's. Feel free what they're discussing for today's webinar, and I hope you enjoy it. So as I'm the moderator, our three objectives today we're going to be talking about are explain the variety of career pathways within the dietetic profession from veteran registered dietitian nutritionist. You'll be able to describe one method, how to become more involved with leadership within the academy, national, state, DPG, or local level. And you'll be able to list one method to overcome obstacles on your journey to career success. Our three speakers are Neva Cochran, Milton Stokes, and Yadrick. The first speaker is Neva Cochran. Neva Cochran is a registered dietitian nutritionist in Dallas, Texas. She serves as a nutrition communications consultant to food, nutrition, and agriculture organizations and is a frequent speaker for professional and consumer groups. As an active member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, she has served as president of Texas Academies, a National Academy media spokesperson, a member of the House of Delegates, past chair of the Academy Foundation, and member of the Board of Directors. She was a 2012 recipient of the Academy's Medallion Award and the 2016 Texas Academy's Outstanding Preceptor Award. She earned a BS in Nutrition and Dietetics from the University of Oklahoma and a Master's in Nutrition from the Texas Women's University. She completed a dietetic internship at Health Resources Presbyterian Hospital in Dallas. So now I'm going to hand it over to Neva, and you can head and talk.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm honored to be the lone woman on this panel. Just want to share with you that years before NOMIN was formed, I suggested to a group of male dietitians, as I can recall, it was Marty, Bob Earl, Bill Barkley, Tom Malone, and Leonard Pringle, may he rest in peace, that they start their own practice group, and they needed to call it Men and Dietetics, Men and Nutrition, or the acronym would be MADMAN. They didn't do it, but a few years later, Milton Stokes and Kyle Shaddix did found NOMIN, and that brings us here today. Being a dietitian my destiny? Here are some pictures of me as a child. The ones on the left and the right were at my grandparents' ranch house in Central Texas where my mother grew up. On the left, I'm cranking an old-fashioned wooden ice cream freezer, and on the right, it appears that I'm peeling potatoes. I'm not sure if they allowed me to use a sharp knife in those days. The middle one is when I lived in Tripoli, Libya, in North Africa, where my father was stationed as an Air Force pilot. Every time my mother would make a pie from scratch, she would also make a small pie for me, and that's what I'm holding standing on the balcony of our apartment there in Tripoli. My dietetics and nutrition wasn't actually that straightforward. In high school, I did take 4 years of home economics simply because I enjoyed it, not that I thought I would make a career out of it. I thought it was too easy and not challenging enough. But a book in high school that was called Careers in Home Economics, and this is the closest thing I could find on Google Images that looked somewhat similar to this book. The only career mentioned in that book that I remember is working for a food company, which I find very interesting considering what I do in my consulting work today. But long before the internet, Google, or social media, I had no idea of how to figure out what I would need to study or what I would need to do in order to work for a food company. So I decided to major in math because I enjoyed it, I was good at it, and one of my math teachers in high school encouraged me to do so. But it turned out I really didn't enjoy calculus, even though I made an A in it. I watched the clock, waiting for each class to end. But what I realized is I also took a philosophy course called Elementary Logic, and it wasn't really math that I enjoyed, but the logic and the problem solving that was involved in it. So then I found nutrition more or less by accident when I discovered one of my sorority sisters was majoring in nutrition. So I looked at the curriculum and I realized that it combined science, problem solving, with something that was very practical that applied to everyone, food and eating. As I mentioned, I pursued my degree in nutrition and graduated from the University of Oklahoma, and then I moved to Dallas for my internship at Presbyterian Hospital, which is now called Texas Health Resources Presbyterian Dallas. And then I went on to my first job, which was as the first and only clinical dietitian at a relatively new private hospital in Denton, Texas called Westgate. After I worked for a little over a year, I decided to pursue my master's in nutrition full-time at Texas Women's University, which was also in Denton. After completing my master's, I returned to the hospital where I did my internship in Dallas, and I worked there for a year as a clinical dietitian. Then I was invited to return to Texas Women's University to serve on the faculty in the dietetics program. And after doing that for 3.5 years, I went on to work for the Associated Milk Producers in their Consumer Services Division. This is an affiliated unit of the National Dairy Council. And that's where I found my true passion, which was promoting balanced nutrition to a variety of audiences, from consumers to teachers to school nutrition staff, the media, healthcare professional, and others. After years with the dairy industry, I went out on my own as a nutrition consultant, and I've worked in a variety of positions over the years, and you can see those all listed on this slide. For 13 years, I taught in an outpatient cardiac rehab program, and for 3 years, I had my what I call foray into food service, where I conducted sanitation and safety audits of Bruegger's, Bagels, and Taco Bell restaurants. It was part of a quality assurance program that the restaurants had internally, and they contracted with Audits International to do these in all of their restaurants throughout the country, utilizing only registered dietitians as the inspector. I was also an ongoing freelancer with Woman's World, a weekly magazine, for 20 years. I wrote the Diet Club column for 8 years, and I also worked in cover features, which included doing research and doing meal plans for the diet stories, which there was one every single week of the year, so that was 52 stories a year. So I did a lot of work with them on an ongoing basis. In addition, I also worked with 2 other magazines during this time, 5 years with Maximum Fitness, which was a men's muscle magazine, and 5 years with The Female Patient, which was a magazine found in physician waiting rooms that dealt primarily with women. And then I started working with more of the food, nutrition, and ag industry groups over maybe the past 10 years or so. And all of my long-term clients are in that bulleted list. So those are clients that I had for a year or longer. The short-term clients are those listed at the bottom, which could be anywhere from like a single campaign, a month, up to 6 months. Currently, my 3 clients are the Egg Nutrition Center, with whom I've worked for over 20 years, the Calorie Control Council, and Monsanto. Here are just photographs that illustrate some of the different consulting positions and what I've done for them. On the left is my Diet Club column in Woman's World magazine. At the top center is an interview on Good Morning Texas that I did about my plate when it first came out. And then underneath that is when I was speaking at the Mississippi Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics a couple of years ago. And on the right is 1 page of a 6-page meal plan that I created for Maximum Fitness magazine. In 2011, our journal had a supplement on leadership, and I want to share a few excerpts from that that I found very interesting about leadership, and I think very pertinent for people who are looking to expand their leadership within the profession or just anywhere in life. According to Sylvia Escott-Stump in one of these articles, experience shows me that leadership opportunities arise when you are doing what you are meant to do, especially when you are passionate about it. And that's one thing I hear over and over again from peers and interns who work with me, that I am one of the most passionate dietitians they've ever met. Sort of my leadership path through the years. I began in Denton, Texas, where I had my first job, and I went to graduate school, and I helped form the North Texas District, and I served as Secretary and Community Nutrition Chair. Then when I moved back to Dallas, I became involved with the Dallas District, and I served in various positions, including President. And then while I was teaching at Texas Women's University, I joined the Dietetic Educators of Practitioners Practice Group when it was first formed, and I served on that board for 3 years. And then in the Texas Academy, I held a number of positions, including president, delegate, and state media rep. And on the national level, I think Jonathan mentioned several of these. I've been a national media spokesperson, a member of the House of Delegates Executive Committee, chairman of the Foundation Board, and a member of the Academy Board of Directors. Just a few of the leadership highlights that I've had over the years. As Texas Academy president, we held our first strategic planning workshop that used the National Academy Strategic Plan as a template and a professional facilitator. And I would say that the feedback from our members was extremely positive in doing so, and that really started us on a path of creating a strategic plan every few years to guide our work. As an Academy media spokesperson for 7 years, I did over 600 media interviews. And when I was foundation chair, I was involved in planning a pilot program in Kansas City for nutrition coaches in schools that later became part of our current Kids Eat Right initiative. I'm particularly proud of the legislative involvement that I've had over the years. When I was Dallas president-elect, I worked actively on our bill for Texas dietetic licensure. Texas achieved licensure on its very first try and was the first state in the country to have licensure for dietitians. And that was before email and fax machines and cell phones, when all we had were phone calls and typewriters and letters that we had to put a stamp on and put in the mail, and then visiting our legislators in person. And at the 2007 National Academy Public Policy Workshop, I led a group of dietitians or members from Dallas to meet with Congressman Pete Sessions, who is my congressman, and he subsequently signed on as a co-sponsor of the M&T bill, which ultimately passed. On the state level, I've worked with my state House representatives, including Carol King, where I coordinated a child nutrition workshop with dietitians and interns for parents and children we conducted on a Saturday in her district. And the bottom picture is all of the group that was involved with that, with Carol in the center. And then after that, her successor was Stephanie Carter, and I served for 2 years on her Public Health Advisory Committee. Back to Sylvia Escott-Stump's article, another quote from her says, "Each of us has within us the power and the responsibility of leadership. How we use this power and fulfill our responsibility is up to each of us." So to illustrate this, I want to share with you what some other leaders have said. I did a leadership presentation a couple of years ago for the Dallas district, and I interviewed several local dietetics leaders and was really struck by what they said. First is from Dora Rivas, who is a past executive director of school nutrition services for the Dallas Independent School District and also a past president of the School Nutrition Association. Dora says, "I never set out to be a leader in child nutrition. However, because I truly believe that school nutrition plays an important role in the lives of our children and ultimately our community, it has driven me to take a strong leadership role in advocating for a healthy environment in our schools." Next is Jessica Setnick, who is a certified eating disorders registered dietitian and a past chair of behavioral health DPG. Jessica said, "Even though I'm not the smartest dietitian or the one who has been treating eating disorders the longest, I am the one who has been out there. Out there is not always a safe or comfortable place for me." Sorry, my ringing. One thing I forgot to turn off. She said, "Even though out there is not always a safe or comfortable place for me to be, I believe that it has been worthwhile for me and for the populations I serve. I would have been just as happy to be a follower, but there just wasn't anyone out there taking the path that made the most sense for me." I want you to keep in mind, leadership is not about leadership is about not winning. Leadership is about leading. The key is to continue on even when you don't win and find other opportunities to not only lead, and these are some examples of other ways that I have been active in the profession that aren't necessarily elected or even appointed positions. I've been a preceptor to over 90 dietetic interns for a week-long nutrition communications rotation since 2003. Also in this past year, I've been working with Tracy Williams, a young member in Chicago who has a physical disability. She contacted me a little over a year ago after hearing me speak on a DPG webinar. So I've been helping her with her writing and speaking projects and also working with her to encourage the Academy to address issues related to members and students with disabilities. And this year, I went back to the local level and agreed to be co-liaison for the Central Dallas area of the Texas Academy's Northeast region, helping to plan events and speakers for local Academy members. And finally, in conclusion, I'm back to the article by Sylvia Escott Stump, where she lists the most effective leadership traits. And these include being committed to being the best, encouraging input from others, being open-minded, not micromanaging others, being a calculated risk taker, having futuristic thinking, and keeping the whole picture in mind, not just your own sphere of influence. So I wish you the very best in your career and your leadership journey, and please feel free to contact me if I can help you in any way. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Jonathan.
Hello, thank you so much, Neva, for the presentation. I know that people are going to be as influenced as I am by you. If you don't know already, Neva is one of my mentors and has been for several years now. So the next presenter is going to be Milton Stokes. Okay, Milton Stokes is a co-founder of NOMIN and a director of global health and nutrition outreach for Monsanto. Before joining Monsanto, Milton had a tenure-track professorship and directed a dietetic internship. He also owned a private practice and is a former restaurateur. Milton's been an active member of the Academy, including delegate for 2 terms and as a national media spokesperson. He also recently won the election for House of Delegates Director-elect. Career in clinical nutrition in New York City and served in staff and management positions as well as precepted dietetic interns and students from several colleges and programs. Milton's master's degree is in public health from Hunter College, and his internship was conducted at Yale New Haven Hospital. He is from Connecticut in communication and marketing with a specialization in health communication. And now we'll be passing it over to Milton.
Thanks for this opportunity to NOMIN and Jonathan for extending the invitation. I'm really honored to tell you my story and be here alongside Neva and Marty, a great group of people who I've admired their careers for a number of years as well. Tell you the background and how I got to where I am today. And it starts with combining food and nutrition together, which is something that I did February 14th, 1989, back when my mom and I opened this little restaurant in Kentucky. And my mom's name was Ann. So the restaurant, we called it Ann's Country Kitchen. A lot of people have heard me tell variations of this story. So if you know, this restaurant, because it was in Kentucky, typical Southern food, that means fried everything for the non-Southerners on this webinar. She'd worked in food herself for many years, and while she had previously owned one business earlier in adulthood, mostly my mom had been working for other people. And I just think she worked in the restaurant business, in the restaurant industry, food service for many, many years. I think she just loved this demanding nature of the restaurant work, the real fast pace. That was exciting to her. My mom had also owned a hair salon at the same time. She was a hairdresser. So I really think of her as an entrepreneur. And my mom taught me everything that she knew about food and about business. So not reaching total job and career satisfaction when she was working for all these other people, that's when I decided to go into business for herself. She just made her own way. And that's what she did when she bought this small restaurant in rural Kentucky. Almost create your own job or create your own career if you can't find it. And this is one benefit of our supervised practice experience, and that's the potential to learn the things but also the things we don't like. And sometimes, this is me, we can surprise ourselves and find that there are unexpected rewards or some type of fulfillment professionally from doing things that maybe we never dreamed of, we'd never planned. This reminds me of Sherry Bork, who I've heard her say that one tool in life and in careers as well is the question. Ask more questions. I would say also accompany them the ability to remain open to the answers, because those answers may not always come from the kindest messengers. And sometimes those answers are hard to hear. But I think all this is a process where I'm changing, thriving through this question and answer process. Amy Poehler, the actress, in her book titled Yes, Please, she has a quote that speaks to me. I've had the privilege and pleasure of wearing many hats. And because of that, my head is sweaty with all the knowledge I have about the biz. I love this quote. I use it in other presentations. Mom reminds me of the path that I've taken. My mom didn't know if her restaurant was going to succeed, and actually it did for 24 years while she owned it. But she just said yes. And that's what Amy talks about, saying yes despite uncertainty. I didn't know if businesses that I created as a dietitian would succeed. Kyle Shaddix and I didn't know if when we founded NOMIN, what its staying power would be. After joining this agricultural company that I work for today, Monsanto, what that worked like and if I would be successful, but I said yes. I would suggest saying yes after doing some research and finding a way, and then try to add humor. Saying I do that to entertain myself, and sometimes it entertains other people around me. So this is my own. I often write about experiences growing up in this town, and as I mentioned earlier, telling stories about the restaurant. You can find a short entry on my LinkedIn page if you haven't already, read things that I've written. In this slide, this is Main Street, very small town, 400 people when I lived there. No traffic light, but we did have a bank and a post office, several antique stores, And we had a restaurant, and that's what I'm trying to point to there in the slide. Most of the customers who came in the restaurant were farmers. They'd come in at the same time, they'd sit at the same table, they'd order the same thing Monday through Friday. And I thought, surely they're getting tired of these same routines, the same food. And back then I couldn't figure it out. I didn't really think about it too much. And I assumed, well, they want to do that. That's their choice, their customers, and we were just thankful for the business. Speaking of business, my mom saw a role as sustainer. And she had to keep the business alive, and that meant profit. And even these small businesses, the mom and pop operations, have to show a profit. And I know profit is maligned and taboo, but without money coming in, the budget can't be maintained. Doors would be closed. People would be unemployed. My mom, as a way of people, and sometimes they didn't have money to pay, or they, if this applied to them, she allowed them to run a tab, or they would pay back by offering some sort of repair services, or sometimes she let people eat for free. Her bottom line sometimes was not so much profit as it was just making sure everybody got fed. So this history of education and employment in addition to the restaurant. So I went to State University for undergraduate, started in biology, and I was the first in my family to go to college, in my immediate family. I had no guidance from anybody about how to navigate or negotiate this process. And by the way, if this sounds like you, if you're lacking guidance, if there are any students on this webinar, please do reach out to me, Neva, Marty. We're very eager to help you. What I did was I picked biology, and I picked the course that another friend had selected. I just said, I'll take what she's having. Signed up for all the same things. And, I eventually found out biology is not the exact fit for me. I asked a bunch of questions of my advisor and other faculty. And I finally took this course called Fundamental Nutrition. And I know everybody on this webinar has either had it or will have it. And that was what did it for me. From there, I developed a relationship with my major professor and advisor, and she gave me a lot of guidance and actual counseling, what I hadn't received before, and said, think about moving as far from home for the internship. And as far as I could comprehend was Connecticut, and I applied and attended a program at Yale New Haven Hospital. And our hospital had twice as many beds as my little hometown had people. And I thought, wow, this is really big. The things that I learned there were amazing. And after that, I took a job with Sodexo in New York City, which was partially my way of fulfilling other people's expectations that we start with clinical. Haven't you heard this before? Somebody will say, maybe it's a professor or a friend or someone in your network, start in clinical. That's how you get your start. And I'm glad I did, but I do cringe a little bit today when I hear people issuing that mandate, as if there's no other way, there's no other path to dietetics. You must start with clinical. No, actually, you don't. And I have this reflexive response where I will often challenge people to think about where else can they go, because you do have options. And that's what I hope this webinar shows you. Well, clinical experience, I did do it for 6 years, and I worked throughout New York City in every borough, acute care, long-term care, outpatient, pediatrics, critical care. I pretty much did it all and grew with Sodexo and had a lot of opportunities. While I was there, I got my master's in public health and focused on education and behavior change. But let me just back up just a little bit. 6 months into this clinical work, I was bored, and I found a lot of the same questions and writing the same notes and seeing the same patients or similar patients, and it wasn't the most fulfilling thing. Clinical work paid my bills, yes, allowed me to live in New York City. Sodexo covered most of my master's. I learned a lot. I'm very thankful for Sodexo, and I think that people who do love clinical nutrition, I'm thankful for those folks. We need clinicians. Most of our profession, I think around 70%, work in clinical, but I just had to do something else. So I started freelance writing in the evenings. I created my own opportunities. I wrote magazines, websites, newspapers. I had columns. I did marketing materials for food nutrition companies, tested recipes for magazines, and I started a company with my friend, Chef Kyle Shaddix, who was mentioned earlier. And this is the work that I found energizing and fulfilling. I got to do what I wanted, and it grew and grew and grew. And eventually, I moved back to Connecticut where I got my PhD in communication and marketing. And I was a teaching assistant, taught a variety of communication courses, and conducted research on persuasiveness of nutrition symbols and some other topics. But this was me creating my path that fulfilled my needs. So I tailored my work on health and nutrition in this program, in this communication program that really wasn't about nutrition. I made it my own. And I had support from an advisor who allowed me to do that. So if you follow the green arrow on the slide, you can see I became a professor and a dietetic internship director. Loved this job. Loved academia. The students were amazing. I was unbelievably happy in this position. And I taught courses that I had loved as an undergraduate and got to advise students. Athens was probably the most rewarding thing, whether it was in the classroom or one-on-one, helping them figure out their next steps. But one of their questions I got was about GMO labeling. In 2013, this was kind of taking off as an issue, and we were all getting emails urging us to support GMO labeling. I thought, well, it's pretty simple. Let me answer the student's question. Let me tell them what I think based on what I've learned. But the more I thought about it, what if I'm wrong? What if there's more to the story? So in my head, GMO was synonymous with Monsanto, and I decided, why not call Monsanto? Let me go to the source. And I'd had a good friend who was working here at the time. I called her up, and that conversation opened and led to me getting a job with Monsanto. So when people ask me how I got my job, I like to say I just made a phone call. And I wasn't hired on the spot. You know, I had to do the interview process, etc. But it started with asking questions that I got asked of, questions asked of myself, questions that I asked of other people. So I think you can see this pattern here. Ask questions. It seems that Sherry Bork is right. Today, I'm the Global Director of Health and Nutrition Outreach, and I get to talk to dietitians and food nutrition professionals around the world about agriculture, about food and nutrition. I jokingly refer to my job as having dialogue for a living. So while I'm talking with them, I'm also doing a lot of listening, and I'm asking them questions, and I'm learning about agricultural practices and food culture here in the United States, but also abroad. And, you know, I said yes to the job without ever knowing what to expect. And really, it was more like I changed careers. I started July 7, 2014. I had an empty desk, a blank slate, and I just made it all up. I created what the path was going to be. I had a lot of guidance from a colleague, Wendy Reinhardt-Capsack, who's now the president and CEO of Produce for Better Health. But I had to navigate a lot of uncertainty. I often said it felt like I was flying a plane while I was building the plane. I'm cared about feeding people. And I know now that I work in agriculture, this is what farmers care about as well. So whether it's a biotech farmer, an organic farmer, large or small, they often face the same challenges, and they do what they do to feed people. And you know what? I realized that they face unbearable uncertainty from Mother Nature. Weather patterns are erratic. I think to my mom's restaurant, to Ann's Country Kitchen, and where these farmers came in, I mentioned at the same time, they sat at the same table, they ordered the same food. And come up to today where I work in agriculture, I acknowledge consistency in some routines. And I think that's why they did what they did. You know, they can't predict the weather, they can't control everything, but if they can have some consistency in their daily lives around their simple lunches, that might make them have one less thing to worry about. You can't tell respect farmers today. So I've already said create your own path if you need to, if it doesn't already exist, and ask a lot of questions. And why not have fun while you're doing it? We don't all have to be so buttoned up with our lab coats and our clipboards and our checklists and our calculators. We can choose to have fun or create fun while we're building networks and making friends. I would suggest how you can help people. And then later, you can ask them to stand up for you with you. You should also feel free to try new things, change the policy if it doesn't suit you, whatever it is. Take a risk. That might mean just dipping a toe in, or you jump in head first. I promise you'll learn something, but I'm not promising it'll be a frustration-free experience. All I'm saying is try to stretch yourself just a little bit. I'm working on that all the time. There's a quote from a dietitian who Neva quoted, Jessica Setnick, and Jessica says, if you know what you will accomplish, ask people for advice that can get you there, not for their opinions on whether you should. If you're committed to your idea, you don't need anyone else's approval to go for it or anyone else's doubt. Sometimes you have to have teams that rally your cause and help you jump through hurdles, but for goodness sake, pick fun people to be around you. And some people, I think now, it's Mark's turn.
Thank you much, Milton. So our next speaker is going to be Marty Yadrick. Marty is a Director of Nutrition Informatics for Computrition, Inc., which is a Los Angeles-based provider of software solutions to the nutrition and food service industry. He is a registered dietitian nutritionist, a former president of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and is currently chair-elect of its foundation. Marty has a Bachelor of Science from Colorado State University, a Master of Science from the University of Kansas, a Master of Business Administration from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and a Master of Biomedical Informatics from Oregon Health and Science University. So please give a warm welcome to Marty Yadrick.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure today. Honored to be on this webinar with you and Eva and with me. About 36 years, and I've started out as a clinical dietitian where I worked for nurses. I really did that work at a period of my career, but about half of the way through there, I started that I needed to do something else. There was something else that I wanted to do in a career. And if you can help me, I'm not advancing my slides.
Flip through them for you? Those arrows at the top of your slides do it. Okay.
Oh, that's right. Never mind, I can do it now. Sorry. All right.
There you go.
So let me back up. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm in the first 9 years of my career. I worked as a clinical dietitian, and as I said, about halfway through that period, I'm not really sure that this is what I want to do for my career. And so I CA, and I did it in the evening because I was working full time as a dietitian. And after a couple of years of one course every term, I said, well, this is going to take me 7 years if I do it. So I doubled up. It was really pretty tough, but then I was able to finish it up a lot faster. And what happened that I graduated, which was in December, was that place where I had the place where I went for my
Hey, Mark, jump in real quick. Your audio kind of seems to be cutting in and out. I don't know if you're moving away from your microphone as you're speaking, but it sounds like you get distant and then closer.
It's on a headset, so if it keeps up, maybe I'll yank it out just a minute.
Okay, yeah, we can just speak loudly because it sounds like you're talking from afar.
Okay. So a position available back where I did my internship that was called administrative officer. The person who was in charge of the department's human resource duties, the budget for capital catering, the department said it was the perfect place to use my MBA. Try it this way. With the remote.
Oh, there.
Okay, sorry about that. It's just my headset. So in that job for years, and then for personal reasons, I ended up moving to Los Angeles. And without a job, and I started looking for a job. At the time, I thought I might be interested in a faculty that might, the lecturer position require a PhD, which I didn't have. And ended up hearing from another colleague about the company I work for now called Computrition, where I've been for years. And I've held a position at company at time, but it's been a great for me. And the best thing about it is they've been very supportive of all my volunteer roles in the academy. And people, I've never had to take a vacation day or a meeting or a volunteer position, and that's been very in terms of my career and being able to do what to do. So let me jump to the whole informatics chapter of my life. I really know what that word even meant. There 12 years ago, but I heard about a course called the 10, and that name just comes from initiative back in about 2005 to educate 10,000 healthcare professionals on informatics by 2010. And I took this and got from the university of the course, and then went on to get a graduate certificate in bioinformatics and completed a master's in biomedical informatics in 2014. So my earlier masters were a lot earlier in my career. This master's in informatics is more of a, I guess, kind of late in life jump for me, but it's something that I've been doing for a lot of years, but just went in a lot more detail through the master's. Even there's always considered there to be 6 areas in dietetics, and even though informatics cross over all areas of practice, there is a certain percentage of the academy that do work exclusively in the informatics area, as I do. When the academy first started doing surveys of members about their use of informatics, they determined that in 2000, about 0.4% of members worked in that area exclusively. And when they did the most recent survey in 2014, that number had gone up to the percent. But if you look at going from 0.4 up to a pretty significant increase. And just to help educate members, the Academy's Nutrition Informatics Committee came up through the work of Dr. Neva Cochran of a sort of an elevator definition of informatics, nutrition as the intersection of information, nutrition, and technology. So about the various volunteers that I've had in dietetics. When I was a clinical dietitian of about 4 years working in that, a boss came to me and said, "Mark, you really need to get involved." And the easiest time for me to get involved was to go see what my district diet association had available, and they had a needed a co-chair. My first volunteer was dietetics, and that was like 1986, somewhere back then. And then I enjoyed the volunteer real much that I went on to become president, and actually after I was president, a year later I was the district treasurer. I enjoyed that, and of course, as you become more involved at the district level, the people affiliate get to know you, and I was asked to run for a position in Missouri, where I lived originally as secretary of Missouri Association. Then when I moved to California, as a vice president position, they called council VP. That was sort of a council on the DPG that they had at them. And then I also became in dietetic practice, like SCAN, the Sports Cardiovascular Nutritionist Group. And I went to their second symposium that they held in 1985. It was on cardiovascular nutrition, and I was a clinical dietitian in that area. So got fired up by that group. Symposium, kept begging to give me a volunteer role. I was able to get in as a symposium program coach, symposium chair the next year. In 1993-94, I was DPG. Throughout some of that time, I was spokesperson for the Academy, worked as a professional issues delegate in the Academy. I was chair of a committees, the Diversity Committee, Informatics Committee, and then was elected Academy Treasurer. I was Academy President in 2009. I've had other roles since then, and as Jonathan said in the intro, I'm chair elected the foundation, the Academy Foundation, take June 1 for a 2-year term. So I've always enjoyed, loved being involved in volunteer roles, and that's really what has made my career. Loved my job all this time, but my career really satisfying experience for me. So just in the last few minutes that I'll be talking, I'll just give you a couple ideas about being involved. Just join. You should be a member of your district dietitian association, and any people belong to or member interest groups. Just might have a newsletter, co-editor, a place to start out and feel comfortable about, or comfortable working in, and do a good at. And then if there's on a ballot that's available, do that. Put your name in, and they're always looking for people to run for ballots. How many single slate ballots in practice groups and district and dietetic associations? Really important in my book to follow. You're supposed to do. Don't be what I call a resume patter. The people that really, really are good at moves and getting appointed to something, they don't know the work. And then with other people, they get appointed or elected to something, and then they don't always follow through. Eventually, that'll catch up with you. So just what you're supposed to do. If you don't enjoy it, step down position when you complete your term, that you might enjoy more. If you know that it's something that you want, keep going. As my colleagues have said as well, be afraid to fail. There's nothing wrong with making a mistake. Being a bias, you learn from that better than the way you can learn. And also, if you do an election and you're highly qualified, election position I ran for, and if I would have given up then, I wouldn't have had much fun and such a experience in my career. The thing is to be patient. May not get that dream job right away, but you might be allowed to a clinical position or a food service manager position that will give you a lot of skills that you're going to be looking back on years down the road. You know, I was what I call a clinical snob. I was in clinical nutrition, nutrition a lot more than the food service of it. And so I picked a concentration in my best, not very food service oriented. I had one food service operations, and I've regret since, especially now where my company's software covers the patient and nutrition area as well as food service. So don't think that you won't learn a lot from, even though they may not be his choice to being or be working in. And finally, this doesn't necessarily have to do with TEDx, but start saying that. We're all need 7 figures, not cents, to have a comfortable retirement. If you're in your 20s or your 30s, that's time to start saving. If your employer has a 401k plan, remember those contributions pre-tax. You can set to $18 a year. That money grows and grows, and you won't have any problem if you start at a young age of getting them that you need to be comfortable. I don't mean you're going to be wealthy, but you're going to be comfortable and you're not staying at the Cuban long-term care facility. And finally, I failed to just say that as being the Foundation Board of Directors that we are marking our 2nd century in the Academy. The Academy and the Foundation have a 2nd century program with really exciting, innovative programs that are being planned for the next years and decades and the next century. And there's a fundraising program along with that, and there's a lot of other information from the Academy and the Foundation about that. Remember to give back. Many of you all may have been recipients of scholarship from the at the career, and don't be afraid, hesitate to give back to the nation and also to the political action. So thanks everyone, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jonathan, and then happy to entertain questions through the feature. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marty. So now we're going to be in the question and answer section. Amy has a list of questions that she received. We'll be spending about 2 minutes on that.
Yeah, hi everyone, it's again. Hopefully you've seen the chat box that's in your WebEx window. Feel free to submit questions. Jonathan, I only have 1 question so far. And Milton, this question came in when you were speaking, so this is kind of geared towards you. With your role at Monsanto, what is your take on GMOs, and where would you recommend going for more resources or information about GMOs?
Oh, thanks for that. I think GMOs are only one solution that available out of a suite of solutions that farmers can choose from. And there are other options such as traditional plant breeding, and that's actually how most agriculture has evolved over the last 12,000 years. I would refer listeners or attendees to the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine's report on the science and safety of GMO, and that report was issued last year. It's on their website. Just Google NAS and GMO and it'll come up. The other place that I tend to send people is to the center, to CSPI, Center for Science and Public Interest. If you Google CSPI and biotechnology, they have a very thorough review of science and safety. And I think as a more thoughtful organization, they offer a very approachable critique. So those are two. And then the third is me. Send me an email or call me or send me a tweet. I'm happy to talk to you.
Jonathan, I don't see any other questions at this point.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the webinar. As you can see on the slide, you can either email me or send me Instagram and Twitter. Or you can send Neva, Milton, or Marty an email or a Twitter for any questions or concerns that you may have regarding the webinar. Please also note that we have your free CPU regarding attendance to the webinar, and please fill out the survey to help guide NOMIN into the right direction as to what you, the audience, want for our next upcoming webinars. Well, that's about it. Have a nice day, afternoon, everybody.
Do you want to do one more? While you were talking, Jonathan, I did get one more.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
And it sounds like this one would be for any or all of you. Do you have a recommendation on skills that RDNs need to possess in creating their own path while also addressing the challenges of the evolving landscape of health nationally and globally?
Question. This is Milton.
Yep, no problem. What skills do you think that RDNs need to possess in creating their own path while also addressing the challenges of the evolving landscape of health nationally and globally?
Oh, that's a really thoughtful question. I can take a stab at it, and I'm sure Neva and Marty have thoughts as well. I'm biased. I have a background in communication. If you can't engage with somebody else and share your thoughts and your ideas while also possessing the ability to listen to them, you're just going to get very far. And if you do get far, you'll remain in a bubble of minded people. And I would hypothesize that you'd probably never grow or change or learn things that you didn't know before. So to get to the point, I think communication is, if I had to pick one thing, is that one skill that actually goes with every job, no matter what you do, no matter where you go. If you cannot communicate your ideas, you won't get what you want, you learn anything new, and it'll be advanced.
Okay, am I on?
Yep, go ahead, Neva.
Now I'm hearing an echo.
Yeah, Milton, if you mute yourself, I think that's where we're picking up the speaker.
Okay, okay, yeah, that's better. I thought it was an excellent answer that Milton gave, and obviously Milton, Marty, and I all are veterans of the Academy's Media Spokesperson program, so I think that communication is very important to all of us, and that's what I do for a living, is I try to translate science into consumer-friendly messages so people can enjoy eating as well as have a nutrient-rich diet. So I agree with the communication being very important, but I'm not sure what you exactly mean by the landscape, but a couple of things came to mind. First of all is I think that in my career I have seen a non-internet, non-social media environment that then has transformed over the last 10 years totally. It has changed so dramatically with the advent of the internet and social media particularly. And so what we are seeing out there is a lot of competition for you know, what makes nutritious diet, what makes health. And it they tend to have a lot of credibility even if they have no basis for the recommendations they're making. So one of the things that I emphasize over and over to the interns with whom I work and in the presentations that I give is that we as a profession must be science-based. We must make our recommendations on the peer-reviewed science-based evidence. Do not tweet a headline. Do not think because it sounds good and it says it references a study. If you don't go back and look at that study, then you know you're no different from the uncredentialed, non-science journalist or blogger that's out there tweeting and writing this stuff. So I think we have to be very, very careful that we have, that is the thing that we have that differentiates us from the other people out there promoting food and nutrition messages. We have science behind us. The other thing that maybe you were addressing when you look at the global landscape, you know, we are here in the world of the land of plenty in the United States. We have an abundance of food. We have a very safe food supply. There are people in this world that do not have access to adequate food. They do not have access to a variety of food. They don't even, some of them have access to clean water. So I think that that is something that we as an academy are looking at, expanding opportunities for our members to do more with that. But I think also as we see people who are getting crazy about what I consider non-issues like gluten and you know, GMOs and safe additives and preservatives that are there to enhance and keep our food supply safe. There are people in this world who don't have food and don't have clean water, and that's who I really, you know, care about. And I care about working, you know, with organizations and people that can address this. So I think we need to really get our priorities in order as professionals and as an organization to really address what's important.
Great, thanks. Marta, add, or do you want me to move on to the next question?
You can go on to the next question, Amy, thanks.
Okay. All right, this one sounds like it could be applicable to any of you as well. So if you were standing in front of a mirror looking at your younger professional self, what is a piece of advice that you would give yourself?
Yes, well, I may have said to, don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's okay. I remember the most interesting things that ever happened to me, like in front of my other interns, giving a presentation, getting asked some questions and getting the wrong part of the test, and I mentioned the wrong part of the small. I've never forgotten the right answers, and so getting out there and doing that you know that fit in and that you want to do. If you make a mistake, it's okay. Don't be afraid to fail.
I would like to add, this is something that I tell interns and young dietitians or anyone else who asks my advice now. It's something that I came up with that evolved over the years, and I think I've actually practiced it, but it is to take opportunities, make opportunities, and walk through fear. And I use that as the theme of the commencement address that I gave last May for the College of Health Sciences at Texas Women's University. If anybody wants to watch it, it's on my website, nevacochranrd.com, under Internet Media. You can watch the 10-minute commencement address. And it really shows that how I went through my career, and not really by design, but just by taking opportunities and making opportunities and doing things that weren't comfortable to me, I ended up where I am today. So that's what I would tell my younger self that I didn't know then.
And I would tell myself to appreciate the process, just not more the outcome. I would also, I have overwhelming urge to get out of school in 4 years and look back on it like, wow, I was only paying $900 a semester for tuition. I should have stayed another year and see what I earned. take my time. And if I am making mistakes like Marty's talking about, that's okay, because it's part of the process. I'm going to learn something and be better.
Great. I'll do one more, and then we'll end because we are at an hour. Milton, this question came in for you, but I think it would apply to all three of you. Do you have recommendations on types of questions to ask bosses or mentors?
That we could go with this. It really depends on what you want to accomplish. Are you asking for a new job, asking for a raise? Are you asking for time off? Are you asking for them to pay for your graduate degree? I would say conversation and where you want to go really dictates what you ask. You could just speak generally, maybe give some advice. Don't surprise people, especially not a boss or mentor. I don't think it's a good idea to show up at somebody's door, who's your supervisor, and ask them for a 20% raise out of nowhere. I'd put something on their calendar 2 weeks down the road or a month down the road and let them know what the agenda is. Every meeting with an agenda. Even if you're the one who did the meeting, have an agenda in mind of what you want to get out of it. And, you know, I know that sounds a little bit selfish, but it helps the people that you're meeting with focus. And maybe it helps them prepare their rejection in advance. Okay, so maybe you're showing your hand too early, but to better use other people's time. And I'll just pause there because I recognize I could go in 20 different directions with this, and let's see what Neva and Marty have to say.
Well, I didn't know anything, but this is a really excellent question. I've had, I mentor a lot of students and younger dietitians, and I've never really thought about this, but what I did come up with is, obviously if you are contacting someone as a mentor, then they must have something that they are doing that you are interested in doing yourself, or that you think that they can help you with. So I think that first of all, I would identify what is it that this person can help me with, so that you could tell them, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z, or I want to be connected to a person who can help me. What would you recommend? I mean, you need to know specifically how this person can help you and ask them, can you help me and what can I do? Be specific about what you need from them rather than just saying, will you be my mentor?
All right, we'll stop there because we are now past the hour. To reiterate what Jonathan said, huge thank you to Neva, Milton, Marty. I think all of your insight and everything is extremely helpful. Jonathan, thank you for moderating. Again, keep your eye out for an email from me, from Amy, with a link to the recording of the session. You'll get your CEU certificate and a copy of the presentation slides. Otherwise, that concludes our session today. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and feel free to reach out if you do have additional questions. Thank you.